Everybody ready? Welcome to Reference Group, Chad and Christian! Get over here! Woo, woo, woo! Woo, 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 woo! You may be seated. Just so you know, that's what it's like when I walk into my home at night and into the office every day. Not at all. Not at all. Yeah, don't listen to anything I have to say. That was really uncomfortable, but thank you. That was great. That was great. No, that's... Do we need this microphone or...
No, I'm going to turn mine on. I just had to turn it on first. But that's exactly why we do it. It's why I make my dad stand up and sing to him on his birthday, because this generation of people is not used to being celebrated. You don't get a lot of standing O's, but you absolutely should. As the person who runs a company, it's very easy to have everybody come at you and complain about what they need. Not a lot of people come in and say thank you. So today we wanted to say thank you to you, because the seat you're in is important. The seat that you're in drives the growth of Utah, but it also comes with a lot of people who want to yell and scream at you. And I think you two know that better than most, because real estate and land development and growing is often uncomfortable for people. Yeah. But before we go there, I always like to ask, my first question is always the same, is what makes you you? If you were to look back at your younger years, what are the defining moments? What are the things that you say, I am the way I am today because of this and that? What comes to mind for both of you? Maybe we'll have Christian and then Chad go.
You know, for me, what makes me me? You know, I grew up in Salt Lake City, but my dad's from Wyoming. He grew up Wyoming, but he also grew up in Clearfield, and so. For me, I grew up, I think I had the best of both worlds, because I grew up in the suburbs, but weekends were rural. I got to spend time, riding horses, being at my grandpa's, farm. We had a place up at Midway that we would go to, and back then, before there was traffic lights and everything there, and just, so for me, that was really informative, because I learned a lot about our heritage and where we came from, and about, I can't remember, 4th or 5th generation Utahn of some of the pioneers that came into the valley. So to me, it was always not that, you're this industrial builder or anything, but it's your heritage of where you've come from. And that's really kind of informed today and giving back, and whose shoulders I stand on.
Thank you. How would you answer that one?
This is going to be a theme throughout, where Christian does this incredibly deep, insightful answer, and then I really like to build things. So I grew up moving a lot. Grew up and spent a lot of time in the southern states, Louisiana, Texas, and Arkansas, and I kind of felt my siblings kind of had a negative experience with that, and for me, I loved it. I love this idea of reinventing myself and creating and doing new things. And then I went and I was an attorney for a long time, and realized how miserable that life is, and how you just really aren't. If there are any attorneys here, I apologize. But,
sorry,
just
attorneys.
how little creation, at least for me, there was. And so just through my whole entire life, this idea of being involved in building and being involved in creating, and the failure that happens through that, but also just the incredible high that comes through that, was something that that's the high that I learned early on to chase, and hopefully through what we do continue to chase.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's an interesting segue right there, because you look at the high to build, but there's the hard reality of the high of building is the failures that are mixed in with that and become a part of it. What have you experienced, or what muscle have you built associated with the failures? Because if you're building something in here, will you raise your hand real fast? More than one person, right? There's a lot of builders. I think one of the common themes of Reference Group is dealing with and understanding how they're a part of the process. Could you just comment on your experiences in those regards?
Yeah, I think the first project that Christian and I did together was actually a long time ago, 6 or 7 years ago, maybe 10 years ago now, a sand company, a frac sand company down in southern Utah. And we went and it was a highly controversial project, and my kids were at the school there, and the community was really polarized, and probably 40% of the community thought that I was the savior of the community, and 40% of the community thought that I was purely just the devil, and 20% didn't care. And in fact, I remember once I was helping a lady put this is going to make me sound really good, but I was helping an old lady put a watermelon in her car, and then she realized who I was, and she hissed at me. She went, because like she remembered me from like some city council meeting where I was presenting, and they were afraid I was going to take all their water or something. And so really early on, at least that was some of my first experiences when I realized, man, sometimes building things, you end up stepping on people's toes, and like there's a different belief in what is good and right, and like you just have to have such high conviction and confidence that you're doing the right thing, because if you're creating and you're building and you're pushing the edges on things, you will step on toes, and you have to get comfortable realizing, checking yourself and saying, am I really doing the right thing? Because you don't want to step on toes just to step on toes. And so there's this like self-evaluation. On that particular project, oddly enough, we said, I don't know that this is something we want to pursue. And so over time, we came to that conclusion. But you have to get like self-confidence in what you're building is pretty critical.
Anything you'd add there on your years of experience on this path?
No, I agree. I think for me, being in real estate development, I remember 20 years ago, we showed up at a municipality for our city meeting where we were doing a mixed-use development. It was going to be a nice one. And they had to move it from the city hall to the high school gymnasium, or the high school auditorium, because of the opposition. And I remember like, oh boy, this is going to be a fun one. But from that experience, I mean, it was a failure, we didn't do it, but you really learn like communicating. What is the vision? How is it beneficial? Why are you doing it? Why do you think it would be good? And just being able to also listen to other people and getting their feedback and their comments. So there's always some balance in there of learning, but I agree, you do need conviction, because sometimes you are really right, or you feel that you're right, right?
Yeah.
Or that it is the best. But other times you really do need to find common ground and solutions, and that there is, other people have really strong feelings the other way, and it's good, really good to take those into account. You need to.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of us who build in tech in the room, but I feel like some things are consistent. Like you have to have conviction in what you're doing, and you have to like go past the point of reason, if you will, to like have conviction to keep going past all the.
Well, you have to be a dreamer in a way, and just be convicted in your vision.
So I think the other thing that I think you have a different level of requirement is consensus building. A lot of the things that you're doing require you to convince a local community that it makes sense for them. I know maybe we can talk a little bit about how Gardner and Philo play together. We maybe give a little background on Gardner, get a little background on Philo, and then we can kind of talk about how you partner and things like that.
So maybe I'll go first and talk about Gardner. So we started off, my dad, so we're a family owned company. And 50 years ago, my dad partnered with Roger Boyer at the Boyer Company, and they had a successful real estate development company. And then about, 20, 25 years ago, two families, Roger and Kim, got together, and like a lot of companies that are family owned, how does succession planning work? How do we go forward? And at the time they decided, well, let's continue to own and operate everything that we have together, but we separate in a good way. Roger's my next door neighbor, but to continue to go do new deals on our own and partner where it makes sense. And we have a lot of partnerships. So that started in about 2003, 2004. And since that time, we've grown, and so we've done a lot of real estate development, but we've also segued into other other areas of business, Philo being one of them. One of the other things we started 6-7 years ago was a renewable energy company. So we do utility scale solar and wind projects and storage, battery storage projects. And we throughout the country, a lot here in Utah and in Idaho, some of the bigger scaled projects. So in a way, we've kind of been morphing a little bit into like a family office, but for the most part, our big operating companies are our real estate, renewable energy, and our partnership with Philo that Chad started, and we'll tell you a little bit about.
Yeah, so there were two families, and we split.
Romeo and Juliet style.
Yeah, I will tell you, just comment on the Gardners. One of their taglines, I don't know if it still is your tagline, but it's building community. And if you ever want to see a master class on how to build consensus and building community and like developing, the Gardners are great developers. They are incredible at community and relationship building. And so not only do you see that in all of the names of Gardner buildings and Gardner enterprises that seem to percolate throughout the Salt Lake Valley, but just we don't get the same, they have had some negative interactions. They have way more positive interactions with municipalities because of the hard work they put in over the last 5 decades. And that's really a testament to the incredible kind of development team and the incredible people they are. Between Kem and Christian is all the very best versions of that. And so 5 years ago, we started Philo, and there was nobody more that I wanted to be involved than the Gardners outside of our operating partners that we have at Philo. And luckily, we were able to kind of convince Christian to say, and Kem, to say, come and let us piggyback on some of the things that you guys are doing from a real estate perspective, but also we'll try to fill some need outside of the real estate perspective. And so Philo really focuses a lot on our entire approach to everything is 0 to 1. We love building, we love creating, and we take that on in every aspect. And so whether it's a large land scale play like we do oftentimes, or whether it's a hospitality play that we're doing, or probably the largest component of what we do within Philo is our venture studio and doing 0 to 1 building. And we have a number of people from our venture studio here that are founders and residents of our various companies, and we try to spin off about 6 or 7 new companies every year and have just incredible partnerships, and couldn't have gotten there without the partnership with Gardner. I don't know that Gardner ever anticipated like spinning up a secondary real estate development firm, but we do some things that are a little bit different than what Gardner focuses on.
Yeah, and I think, maybe we can explore that now, because I think that's an interesting one. First of all, Gardner built this building. Gardner built the Plural Site building. You have 2 lots also on the same property that you all own. So if anybody needs to build a building in Draper, here you go.
And I will say we actually at partners with Blake and Pelion on this building as co-owners, and they've been amazing partners. Like in fact, I think this was the last building done before office became uncool and nobody went into it anymore. I really think this was it. And we went with something totally new, and it's the state's first mass timber building.
Which is really cool,
at the
too.
time, yeah. Really give a lot of credit to Pelion and Blake and Steve. And
so this is not a steel,
no
steel building, right? This is a wood building.
It's a wood building, yeah.
Which is unique for something of this size, because there's 5 or 6 story buildings everywhere, but all of them kind of look and feel the same, and this does not feel that way.
Yeah, so there may be a few columns that are steel, but for the most part it's wood decking, little concrete. But we did it for a few reasons. One, the look and the feel is amazing. Yeah, it was, and how they kind of like Tinker Toys. Do you remember? How they would build it, and everything came prefabbed. It was amazing, and plus there was a lot of carbon savings that went in it. Which was when we were exploring it, I was thinking, I don't know, you're going to cut down a lot of trees, build a building, and then when you look at the carbon sequestering and how fast those forests regrew, it was really kind of interesting in how much the carbon savings were from not doing the concrete and the steel.
That's super cool. Yeah, so Gardner, the way that we talked about it before was like kind of the middle of the fairway. Philo kind of plays out in the rough, trying to find 0 to 1 opportunities. You have 4,500 acres near Kanab that you're looking at. Sorry.
4,500 near Heber.
Near Heber. Okay, and then how much is the square footage or the acreage
We have
in
about 600 acres
Kanab?
near Kanab.
Okay, near Kanab. So you're playing at very large scale. The idea of building cities. Can you talk us through how you're envisioning these things?
Yeah, I think that there's when we did the sand deal, and we've done a number of other ones with the state of Utah. So a lot of our development starts with SITLA land. And once you have a relationship,
Can you say what that is?
So SITLA is the state trust. They own millions of acres of land. Their whole responsibility is to get value out of that land for the school children, is what they say. So, and that is what funds. Since Utah doesn't have a lottery, that's largely the way that our educational system is funded, or at least a big portion of that is through SITLA. And so once you have some of these, in fact, some of these large developments you see that happen to be on big, large SITLA blocks. So when the state was incorporated, they would take very specific blocks and they just gave it to the state and said, this is yours, you can get any through lease revenue, you can sell the land, you can do whatever, and that money will go to the state coffers to take care of largely educational needs. And so these are 720 acre blocks, and oftentimes they've been broken up and different things have happened. But once you have this relationship with SITLA, you can go and have conversations on various spots and say, hey, we think that there's a good opportunity for development here. We're going to go in from a partnership mentality, or we're going to do a purchase right or something like that. And so a lot of our deals start with some of those relationships. But for example, Kanab was a private sale. And we ended up just buying that one outright. But our big focus is there are a lot of just incredible developers doing things at one scale. Our question is around the same. We piggyback on the Gardner's concept of building community. And to really truly build community, you need scale and you need enough room to be able to do the mixed use that happens. But that's pretty scary for communities when you go and show them some of the things at scale, especially a community like Southern Utah and Kanab and stuff like that. They're looking at that and saying, you want to put 1,400 units here. There's no way you're ever going to absorb 1,400 units. And we tell them, look at the projections of what's going to happen in this state over the course of the next 30 years. Absolutely, you're going to need those units. And you're going to need a whole lot more than that to be able to address some of the housing crisis that exists here in this state. So that's really how we approach things, is how can we go and find new communities to develop from a land development perspective.
No, yeah, and I think the other thing that I just want to make sure that gets communicated is that land right now, when it's part of SITLA, is only making very small dollars in tax revenue. And you have the opportunity to, what would you say is the multiple on the tax dollars of that land pre and post?
It's weird because SITLA doesn't think, SITLA's like the very best partner because they think generationally, right? They're not worried about, they view themselves as having no land holding costs. They don't pay taxes on their land. And so for them, they're like, we're just going to hold on to this thing until we see an opportunity that makes sense. A lot of the SITLA land is being leased for grazing rights, and you're right. Like a 500-acre piece might make them $1,500 in a year on grazing rights. So it's next to nothing. So when you do a comparison between that and oftentimes what we do with them, sometimes we'll allow SITLA, or SITLA will allow us to go into a partnership where there's a revenue share arrangement, and then it's obviously hundreds of times more than what they currently are getting. So
I think that's an important point, because we always just look at it from like, oh, that greedy developer is going to make so much money. But if you understand the context of like, well, the development happens because Utah's growing and we need places for all the people who want to move to Utah to live, one, and two, there's a tax revenue opportunity for the state that is going to pay for the education of everyone. So it's like, you have to bring all of these things, and when you're running a development, you go in front of a city council, they're not saying the nicest things, and they're actually changing the venue to somewhere bigger so they can yell at Christian Moore, right? So like, I think that's just an interesting perspective for all of us to understand. We think it's hard as normal entrepreneurs building something and having to deal with feedback. You deal with feedback right in your face all of the time. So this is a question I've been asking myself a lot lately, but the premise is like, what has to be true for Utah to achieve its potential? And that was one of the things about this conversation that I was most interested in, is I have my thoughts on what has to be true for Utah, but I'm curious, maybe Christian and Chad will could you maybe comment on how you think about from a development standpoint, or just from your perch of where you see a lot of interesting things? How do you think about Utah in terms of what it needs to achieve its potential over the next 10, 20 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so when I think of Utah over the next 10, 20 years and what needs to be true, I think what needs to be true is that we need to have a common vision and understanding of what Utah can be, where we need to go. I think education is a huge part of that we need to be doing a better job in our K through 12, and we really need to have a big focus as well on higher education, which includes, the technical colleges, the trade schools and everything, because we do need economic opportunities for everyone. You look all across the state. And I say that because Utah is in a unique position where it has one of the most diversified economy. It does the best in social mobility of people of continuing to go up. So there's so many positive things, but some of the areas that now it's suffering from, then you'll get to, is affordable housing. Housing is a problem. I think we're now, the 10th most unaffordable or 9th most unaffordable state. Like, those are things that are going to, hurt economic development. So when I say what needs to be true, I guess what I'm really saying is we just, as a group, Utah has benefited so much from that we work together. And that collaborative effort needs to keep going forward, and all these areas of like education and growth and, just as we start talking about infrastructure and everything. But it's that collaborative effort that Utahns have had over the decades that has really propelled us forward, and we need to keep that going. We need to be working together.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, I think of the number of stories where closed ecosystems are like the best way to go, and there's very few. Like open ecosystems happen to flourish so much better than closed ecosystems. And Utah struggles with a lot of the mentality of, I'm here, I've got to shut the door behind me. And we struggle with that from a development perspective. I mean, when you look at the Gardner Policy Institute, it says that in 30 years, we need roughly 842,000 new housing units in the state of Utah. And if we're at the current pace we're at, we're going to be 250,000 units shy of where we need to be. So there's an absolute supply criticality here. In fact, Governor Cox talks about it being a moral dilemma that is pretty critical for us. His goal by the end of 2028 is 150,000 new housing units, 35,000 of those being single-family residences. And I think maybe they have 5,200 of those delivered to date. So there just needs more supply. So that's the most critical component here. I think Utah is a unique state in that if we can solve that, it is naturally, because of the people, because of the climate, because of the environment that exists here, we can attract the most incredible talent. But right now, talent can't stay here. There's, I don't know how many of you have kids that are trying to buy homes in Utah, but it's very, very difficult.
Yeah, they're all living in their basements right now.
The median home price is not attainable. And so for us, there's a lot of developers that are working on affordable housing, true affordable housing, government affordable housing, and they're doing incredible things. For us, the niche we're looking at is attainable housing. And how do we get things that are not necessarily government sponsored, but it's just simply market driven on that means more density, that means smaller lot sizes. It means homes that aren't necessarily 4,000 and 5,000 square foot homes, but we're back to like 1950s development where it's saying you should be able to have your starter home be 1,000 or 1,200 square feet, and that should be okay. But there's very few developers building for that kind of home style, and that needs to happen in order for us to get the prices down. Unless we're going to get a bunch of subsidies, but we all know that comes at a price.
Yeah, and this is interesting, Chad, to talk about the trade-offs. And this, I was talking to a nurse up at Intermountain at a hospital recently, and she was younger, 20s, and she's an RN. She wanted to go on and get a master's, and she's looking at master programs, but she's debating, do I do it? Because if so, I'll incur some debt, and that will keep me from being able to get into a home how many more years? So what you don't want is what you're talking about, this getting more educated as a state when you're making these short-term trade-offs of I'm not going to continue my education and go to school and invest myself, because if so, I'll have too much debt and I'll never be able to get in a home. I mean, you can see where those trade-offs are really going to hurt the state. And I'm sure many of us here are in the same boat, or our kids are in the same boat of how do we keep affordability? How do we keep this going? And, that's a good argument for higher ed too. We need to keep tuition down.
Yeah. No, totally. Maybe I'm going to switch gears for a second, just because I want to make sure we have time to talk about this one. When you're running organizations, you have people, every day you're in this process of like choosing what's most important for your teams to do. What would you say to the leaders in the room around prioritizing? How do you think about like team leading? What would you counsel to people in terms of what you've seen work well and not work well in this idea of leading an organization through the landmines?
The number one thing is to bring in people much smarter than you, and we did that with Brady Southwick, who's our president, who has helped us navigate a complex and changing market and avoiding a lot of landmines. But at the root of that, and what Brady's been excellent, is really focusing on the teams and team communication and the collaboration and working together. And really just that collective vision of like, look, we're all in this together and we've got to start working together. And I'd rather turn the microphone over to Brady to do it, because he's been really, really helpful. And you're great. I mean, when I go to your office and your teams, leadership, I mean.
We have incredible. I think that we're in kind of a unique space because we focus on 0 to 1, that failure enablement is like really heavily baked into our model, and it has to be, where we just are really, really, we have, I'm gonna say it, it's gonna say it really bad. So we have a gong, like a lot of people do, and you'd like have something awesome, somebody goes and rings the gong, and then when you have
some else have a gong?
Well, everybody has a gong, like that's obviously.
I'm not seeing a lot of head nods on that one.
No, they have gongs. It's an embarrassing thing to admit.
No, that's fine.
But the second one's the worst one, which is like when we have a failure, we have this like, somebody came back from New York and brought this big rubber chicken that gets, so we say, you got to go squeeze the chicken. And because you failed on this particular thing. I know it's not the most appropriate thing maybe to say, but you failed on this particular thing. We're okay that you failed on this particular thing. Like, it's just part of our environment in that 0 to 1 space. And I think that if you have teams that you trust and you're not worried about like performance issues, which we don't worry about performance issues because we have an incredible team, then the failure isn't a failure of the individual, it's a failure of whatever we're pursuing. And we're gonna have a bunch of failure because we're in that space. And so I think not necessarily rewarding failure, but certainly having an environment that allows that and encourages that, to be able to get through that very quickly and move on to the wins, to ring the gong everybody has.
Ours is the same thing, to not stifle innovation and creativity, but let people do what they do best, to let them innovate. You know, don't micromanage.
Yeah.
Don't let them have freedom.
Very good. Start thinking of your questions. If you have a question, I'll take like 1 or 2. So first one to show their hands up here, and the second after I ask this one. Rochelle's ready. Okay. Listen, they said they were open to questions because like we get harder questions all the time. Like, we're not scared of questions. I normally don't do Q&As. Maybe like the last thought here is like, for someone what's your motivational thing that you say to yourself, or like what's your kind of mantra for when you're in the tough moments? What would you share as kind of like final advice to people who are in the thick of it?
From a personal?
Yeah, personal development, like personal, like.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm going to let Chad start while I think for a second.
Also good delegation.
It has been really convenient that he's always, and then I think when we do get pushback, and we do get pushback often, I used to take it really personal. And, when we were it was Kanab, actually the first project we were doing, and my kids were at school, and teachers were like giving my kids a hard time because of the development we were going to do. And that was very, very hard for my family and very hard for me because my personality is like this collaborative, we can do this together kind of personality. And all of a sudden I'm like, man, I am like hated. I am hissed at. And, and I think that I've come to the conclusion that fear drives a lot of things that people do. And so when I'm having that pushback or I'm like starting to feel that discomfort, I try to take a little bit of ownership of what have I not done to help alleviate some of the fears that are there. I can't fix it all, right?
Yeah.
If you're like an anti-growth individual, and there are anti-growth individuals. I mean, the problem, one of the major problems in Utah right now is a lot of platforms, governmental platforms, and people running for different offices. You'll have county commissioners or city councilmen or women who have simply ran on a platform of no growth, and like you can't work with that person, right? Like you go and you present the most incredible thing and they're gonna say, I'm sorry, I love what you're doing, but I ran on a platform of no growth, I have to vote no. And so understanding where people are coming from and understanding their limits and understanding what creates fear for them, I think have allowed me to be much better equipped to respond to those kinds of situations. So that's my internal maybe mantra is, hey, if I'm getting a negative response back, have I not alleviated some fear, or have I not identified some fear that they might have that I need to just seek a little bit more understanding and address that?
So seek to understand, yeah.
Yeah, and mine would be, along those lines of just, if you're doing things for the right reasons, which for me are not monetary, but you're doing them because of the social good, the impact, the benefit, that if you do that, you have integrity, you're transparent with people, whether it's your colleagues or those in the on the outside organizations that you're working with, and you're honest and you provide good value, that you're going to be successful, and you're doing it just for those right reasons, and it's not just about making I want to go make $1 million, and you contort yourself in a lot of different ways to try and justify it, but you have a bigger purpose,
The why is
bigger,
different than just making money.
The why has to be different than making money.
Awesome, thank you. You ready, Rochelle?
Oh, I'm ready.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
You just say it, yeah.
Do you want a microphone? Sure. Do you want to sit on the chair?
No, you're going to be in the hot seat. So one question that I have, I grew up in Texas, in Harris County specifically, where there's not a ton of municipalities inside of that county, and that county's population has grown, doubled, tripled, quadrupled since I was born. Living in Salt Lake City, I've learned about how Salt Lake County has 23 cities and towns. Utah County has, I think, 24 municipalities. And so when you think about potential constraints to growth in Utah, is the way that we're set up as a state the right way for growth for over the next 30 years? And/or is there a market in another part of the country that you study to inform making development decisions here in Utah?
I'll start, I guess. Yeah. My personal belief is counties exist for the creation of municipalities, right? They're there until a municipality is prepared to be there. Counties should not necessarily, again, in my opinion, we need to have our counties release a little bit more density so that it can encourage city development. Because while you have those number of cities in those two counties, when you get to the rural counties, it's almost impossible to create new cities. It's impossible to create, which the legislature has addressed some of those things, right? Where they say, if you've got a municipality or a county that is being obstructionist, they've got a bill called 258, which we took advantage of in southern Utah, which is a preliminary municipality process. And it says if you're not getting traction with the local community, go ahead and apply for this thing. So it's super controversial, right? Because now all of a sudden you've got a county saying, this is our land, we have land jurisdiction, and the state just kind of took it over and gave it to this developer and said, go build a city. Like, it's a very, very rough and ready way to address the problem. But this is just an indication of where Governor Cox is like, if counties aren't going to do the right thing, and if municipalities aren't going to do the right thing, we as a state are going to do the right thing, and we're going to create avenues for individuals to do that. I think it's an aggressive way to do it. My hope is that we can figure out more collaborative ways to do this. We can figure out ways that involve the local communities a little bit better. But in the meantime, the way we're addressing that kind of issue is we have an incredible state government and state legislature that's supportive of saying, hey, we've got to address that 850 housing units over the next 30 years. And if the local municipality doesn't see that, we see it. And it's a moral crisis. I don't know that answers your question at all.
That's good.
No, that's actually a really good question. I haven't really thought about it too much as to, I can see the problems that you're addressing when you have these piecemealed municipalities and when you get piecemeal policies, and it really is frustrating. And yes, I'm sure there are some better forms that we really need to be looking at. I would just say, from what Chad's saying, having a stronger state government leaning in at times and creating incentives for states for like density or having being on the same page is strong. And you could do that with sales tax distributions or road funds for A and B or B and C roads or things like that you could create incentives for density, like you're saying, or create your own municipality as that tool of last resort, which they did. So that's a really good question. Can I come back in a while and answer that one? No, well, it's not hard to stump me. Any question will do that.
Okay, I'm going to pause here. If you have questions, you're welcome to come up after. But can we give these two a round of applause for the time?